And welcome back to the Hot Lap, and we're talking potentially Red Bull's sour grapes of their constant protesting against McLaren, against Mercedes. I mean, maybe they do need to look at themselves and think, okay, maybe it's us that are just not good enough. At least that's what Mercedes did from 2022. They looked inward, they didn't really improve as much as we all hoped, but they weren't throwing their toys out the pram, accusing everyone else. In respect of that, yes, I appreciate changing your car, etc. That was more about safety, if I'm honest. But even if Toto Wolff looked himself in the face, they weren't protesting anything. And to be fair, he did have to change his car. And they did, and Mercedes aren't too bad at the moment. Red Bull aren't really as bad as everyone makes out, but they're still protesting because they feel they're not winning. It's all getting a little bit silly. So here's an article where I'm going to even agree with Mohammed bin Sulayem. Shock horror. But this is the most recent one. And it's about Red Bull's initial decline. And Zak Brown, yes, he is throwing shade at McLaren. Yes, he is stirring the pot. But he said he's not surprised when he reveals what he's read about Red Bull's regression. There's a reason to this, because we're going to go into the protest in a bit. So Zak Brown, the McLaren chief, says he's not surprised that Red Bull have regressed following the high-profile exits of both Adrian Newey, Rob Marshall and Jonathan Wheatley. Now, despite the team's ongoing success with Max Verstappen, Red Bull have lost a number of key figures over the recent years, which we all know. Marshall became the first senior member to announce his exit. That was all the way now, back in May 2023, helping McLaren in their 26-year wait for the Constructors' Championship in his first season as their chief designer in 2024. Oh, that must be a bit sore. But one of the more significant ones was Adrian Newey. They say here, and I can't disagree, the most decorated individual in F1 history. He's got an involvement in over 200 race wins, a combined 26 titles. That's both drivers and constructors. Now, the announcement of Newey's departure last May, about a year ago now, was followed weeks later by the news that Jonathan Wheatley, Red Bull's longest-serving sporting director, was to become the team principal at the Saudi/Audi outfit. Fair play and well done for Audi. The 58-year-old took his role up at this most recent Japanese Grand Prix. Now, Verstappen did, let's not forget, a really amazing fourth title in 2024. But Red Bull have suffered a noticeable decline over those last 12 months, with the reigning champion limited so far to just one single victory. Now, having initially played down the significance of Newey's departure, Red Bull advisor Helmut Marko admitted, of course, we're missing a man like that. Now, before reiterating his confidence in the team's depth, let's say. Now, speaking to Dutch publication, yes, that one has come up again, Dead Telegraph, Brown has claimed that there is no great shock that Red Bull's performance level has waned. He said, am I surprised that Red Bull have regressed? No, I'm not surprised. Now, to be fair, that's not exactly headlines, but he said, when you lose guys like Adrian Newey, Rob Marshall, Jonathan Wheatley, and probably others, that's not surprising. And he said, and from what I read, most of it, it's mostly said from Red Bull that they will not miss them, but that's what it looks like. I understand Red Bull, with no way were they going to admit that they're going to miss them. Rob Marshall now works for us as chief designer and is a very smart engineer. I see what he has brought to the team. He's doing a fantastic job. Now, his comments came after he admitted to that McLaren have approached Max Verstappen on the possibility of signing them. In the end, Piastri did sign a contract extension with McLaren on the eve of the season-opening Australian Grand Prix, with Brown revealing in the aftermath that he'd made contact with Verstappen's management. That's quite normal. A lot of teams are going to send out feelers to see. And he said, about that phone call, it's my job, as we rightly said here, to explore the market and to know what's going on. We must not forget that at that time, I was also negotiating with Piastri about a contract. I want to be able to estimate where a possible stone could fall, or should fall, and what could cause a domino effect, because that could trigger interest in my driver again. That is the reason I made inquiries, but I'm a happy camper with Piastri and Norris, he said. Brown went on to hit that Verstappen's financial demands meant a move to McLaren was never on the cards. And he said, let me put it this way. During the phone call, I got the information I needed. Yeah, fair enough then. So, when we scroll up here from motorsport.com, trying to get too sick by looking at your screens, a big apology. No, I don't have the story there. But here we go. So this is it. Red Bull. Now, McLaren calling Red Bull to launch FIA protest Red Bull have constantly said about if this is illegal. They've questioned McLaren. They questioned the tyre water last year, which is why Zach Brown had what was it, drinking the tyre water very explicitly during the practice session. But he's welcomed the protest to the MCL 39, though he wants it to come at a potential price. What do we mean? So Brown's comments have come amid an alleged belief from Red Bull that rivals at McLaren are using these illegal tricks to cool their tyres. It's all about the brakes. Something which Brown made a cheeky nod to recently at the Miami Grand Prix with the tyre water bottle. Now, Red Bull had been the dominant force of Formula 1 in the ground effect era. Let's not ignore the fact that Red Bull have done amazing from 2022 through to 2024. But McLaren emerged towards the end of last season as arguably the car to have, securing that 2024 Constructors' Championship. Although, I will say, maybe if they didn't have Perez, Red Bull would have put up more of a fight. Now, their first team's title, that was since '98, McLaren and Coulthard. Now, Lando applied pressure on Max Verstappen, who stood firm to win a fantastic fourth straight Drivers' Championship. And in the latter stage of the campaign, word emerged that Red Bull reportedly suspected McLaren to be among the teams putting a small amount of water into their tyres for cooling, which would carry benefits. The governing body and tyre supplier Pirelli found, funnily enough, no evidence. But according to Automotive and Sport, that had not quelled Red Bull suspicions. Remember, this is something that also Red Bull had done in the past. At the time, it wasn't illegal, but then it was ruled illegal. Was it not in the sport? Not what in the sporting code, so to speak, probably, but that doesn't make it illegal. Now, MUS claim Red Bull have even rolled out thermal imaging cameras. I mean, these guys are going to the extreme to monitor the MCL 39 as Norris and Oscar come in for the pit stops. These cameras focusing on the tyre cooling ducts, with Red Bull allegedly seeing many blue areas around the brake vents on the McLaren tyres, an anomaly compared to other cars. Now, Brown has moved to speak about this. Now, challenging Red Bull to put their money where their mouth is if they are convinced that the MCL 39 is indeed illegal, as he proposed a price that a team should need to risk paying. The American already made an amusing reference at this saga at the Miami Grand Prix, Labour drinking that bottled water and they labelled tyre water. But Zach Brown said it needs to be meaningful in terms of I'm choosing to spend money on a protest rather than my own racing car. Brown is quoted by the Telegraph, not Del Telegraph, as he suggested a fee to be established for lodging a complaint with the FIA. He said, we're all right at the limit of the budget cap. I know how much we will not waste $1 on anything which we don't think brings performance. So it's probably $25,000. Would I spend $25,000 on a distraction tactic or develop my race car? I'd spend it on my race car all day long, he said. So it doesn't need to be hundreds of thousands, but it needs to be meaningful enough that you're taking away performance you could be spending on your car. The caveat on that is, if you are convinced and think there's a very good chance you can say that that is illegal, the 25,000 then, would be probably worth it to slow your nearest rival down. Absolutely. Which is fair enough. But he said teams have historically made allegations at other teams. Most recently, one team focuses on their strategy more than others, Red Bull, although he hasn't said it, and I think there is a proper way to protest a team at the end of a race, he said, and you have to make it formal. Disclose where it comes from, you have to put some money down, and that should come against your cost cap if it turns out you're wrong. I think that would significantly stop the bogus allegations which come from some teams in the sport. I completely agree, especially if it comes out of your cost cap. You've really got to be sure. And Mohammed Ben Sulayem has also been in on this, and I kind of agree with him. I'm shocked. But maybe the reason why he's agreeing is different. We'll get into that. But the FIA president, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, he has agreed with Zach Brown that team protests should be accompanied with a sizable deposit. Brown raised the point after Red Bull hinted that McLaren cooling of their tyres was illegal. During the tail end of last year, they were talking about injecting water. We've talked about that. And he said that it should be a process where you spend money. I completely agree. Now the president has agreed with Brown and suggested a figure as high as 50,000. Now, the cynic in me says the figure 50,000 because the FIA is always hungry for money. Maybe that's right, because that money's then going to go to the FIA, isn't it? Let's be honest. Yeah, the protest. Yes, it's not going to cost 50,000 to check the protest, so they're going to have a lot of money. Maybe I'm being a cynic, but he said you cannot just accuse someone without a written complaint, and that protest, you have to pay money. And he also commented on the cost cap, but we won't get into that, calling it a headache, but he's being silly, in my opinion. But yeah, I agree with Mohammed Ben Sulayem. Do you, in relation to the cost cap? But until then, if you are not subscribed, hopefully we've earned your subscription or your continued watch if you're already subscribed. Thank you very much for watching. hit that like button. That's going to help us a lot if you want. But to be fair, you just watching this video and making it to the end is more than enough for us. But until then, stay safe, speak to you soon, and see you next time. I, once again, pressed the wrong outro. I pressed subscribe instead of outro. Amateur. See ya.